me, opening day, and I think for a lot of Cincinnatians, it is truly a local holiday. But it represents a rebirth, and spring is here, and the slate is clean. You know, anything's possible. The Reds can win it all this year. There was no skepticism. There was no negativity. It's all optimism. And it's a feel-good party kind of day in Cincinnati on opening day.
When games started to be televised and ESPN would have a night game the night before, it used to irk me because I wanted our game to be the first game. I wanted our pitch to be the first pitch. Like, we took pride in that. In baseball, like, we are the kind of the founding fathers of baseball, and we took care of it and took pride in it.
I've been really lucky to have been to quite a few of them over the years. Even when I lived on the West Coast, as I do now, always try to make it back. If I see one game a year, I try to make it for opening day because it's such an electric atmosphere. It's just one of my favorite days of the year by far.
Thank you very much, Ed, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Great American Ballpark on a glorious day for baseball. The single biggest day in the calendar year in our great city, year in and year out, and we're moments away from getting it underway. We'll be back with the lineups and the play-by-play action in just a moment.
It was his first half inning. It was 1974, Atlanta Braves, Jack Billingham on the mound, Hank Aaron sitting one home run away from the most iconic record in all of baseball. And if you go listen to the call now, it was flawless. And he's straight out of AAA at this point. It was flawless. And right then you knew this guy's special. This guy was put on earth to do this.
You know, they opened against the Atlanta Braves, and I'd gone through the entire spring with the club, and we'd broadcast every game. So, I mean, in terms of being battle tested, I felt like, you know, I was ready to broadcast a regular season big league game. And then, you know, I get into Riverfront, and there's 55,000 people there, and I was a little bit taken by that. The Braves' desire was to not play him in that series because they wanted him to tie and then break the record, if at all possible, against the Atlanta Braves. I mean, the LA Dodgers, who were coming in for the home opener for the Braves at Fulton County Stadium. And the commissioner stepped in and said, no, he's got to play the opener. And so, you know, the game begins, and Jack Billingham's pitching for the Cincinnati Reds, and the first two batters get on base, and Billingham falls behind in the count, 3 balls and 1 strike. And the next pitch, Aaron hits it on a line drive over the left field wall.
Billingham with a pause, the 3-1 pitch, swung on, long shot, into deep left field, Rose is back, and that ball is gone. A home run. Henry Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth's home run record of 714 with a clout over the 375 marker in left field. The Braves are piling out of the dugout. The crowd is on its feet in mass here at Riverfront Stadium as Hank Aaron has just hammered a 3-1 pitch from Jack Billingham over the left field wall, and the Braves are out front 3-0.
And the inning finally ended, and Joe Nuxall, God bless him, said, what in the hell do you do for an encore? I said, I don't know. I mean, I was overwhelmed by the immensity of the home run and what it meant in baseball history. But it was quite a way to break in for a young announcer in his very first game in the big leagues. I mean, people that I think everybody in captivity knows about it, but that off chance when you run into somebody and they ask you to recollect, they don't believe that you could begin a career like that. So I was very fortunate.
From right then, we knew we were in for a treat, and none of us knew that it was going to be 40-plus years of just a master at his craft.
Oh, he's right at the top. I mean, that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. You know, you make the Hall of Fame, they don't give it to you. You got to earn it. And Marty's entertained a lot of people for a lot of years.
You know, we were thinking about 150 years of Reds baseball. In 2019, we celebrated that. And knowing that Marty had done almost a third of those games, it really put it in perspective. And Thinking of the Hall of Fame and Reds history and all the past broadcasters that have come through here ever since the game started being broadcast on the radio, and knowing that Marty has been that connection to the fans, and it is thousands and thousands of games, that impact that he's had on this club, building this brand throughout Reds country, is immense. Even Wade Hoyt was here for about, I think, 20 to 26 to 29 years. I mean, Wade Hoyt had a huge influence on fans. But then in the 1970s, guy that nobody really knew much of, Marty Brennaman, comes into town, gets to call some big-time games, experience the Big Red Machine, endear himself in the hearts and minds of Reds fans everywhere, and just connect throughout Reds country, this mass radio network that took Cincinnati to all over the area. And I think that's why there are so many Reds fans today. Has a lot to do with guys like Wade Hoyt, Red Barber, a little bit of Al Michaels, but certainly Marty and Joe.
We would watch, I'd go with my grandfather, who was a huge Reds fan, so was my dad. And I learned how to score when I was very young, so you know those score sheets. And I would sit the radio on and I'd score them, and I had stacks of, I wish I knew where they were at. I had stacks of the games that I scored listening to Marty and Joe. And so when the Reds were on television, I remember turning down the radio or turning off the television, not off, but the sound off, and listening to Marty and Joe broadcast Reds games. And that was as far back as I can remember.
A great Friday night for me as a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old was large pizza, 2-liter Mountain Dew, Reds on TV, turned down, Marty and Joe, scorebook out, got to listen to the pregame show, get the lineup. I used to know every National League lineup off the top of my head. Like, you wouldn't even have to, I wouldn't have to be like, hold on a second, Astros, like, I knew them all because I kept score the games and listen to Marty and Joe.
I grew up in Hoover, Alabama. Now, you would think that Alabama, Cincinnati, a long way. Most people down there are either Braves fans or Cardinals fans, or maybe Astros, but more the other two. I just loved the Reds. It was just, it was the Charlie Hustle. Don Gullett was my favorite pitcher when I was growing up. I used to have a lineup that I would have in my garage, and I would have them listed down, and I would pretend I was announcing the ball games, throwing the ball against the house. And the reason I say that is I was a fan of the voices way before I was a fan of the game itself. Listening to Marty and Joe, listening to Keith Jackson do Alabama football, Vin Scully doing the Dodgers ball games, Mel Allen on This Week in Baseball. I mean, how good is that? But my dad and I would sit in the driveway and go back and forth in the car, because inside, back in those days, you didn't have the MLB app, you didn't have the XM radio, and even though you had these big monster stereo systems, the antennas couldn't carry. There were days we'd grab a plate of dinner, go out and sit in the car, back and forth in the driveway, but as long as you were moving, you could keep Marty and Joe on the air.
I was the kid that would sneak my transistor radio beneath my pillow. My parents were going, go to bed! You know, it was a school night, but it was a West Coast game. They were in the National League West back then, so the games were on late. But I couldn't go to sleep, win or lose, until Joe said he was rounding third and heading for home. I'd be like, he hasn't said he's rounding third and heading for home yet, Mom. Go to sleep. Well, it turns out my parents were listening to the game too.
I remember being in my dad's truck as a kid, and my dad was so cheap, he refused to even get a radio in his Ford F-100 pickup truck. So I remember like listening to the transistor radio of Reds games, and hearing like every time he'd shift gears, the transmission would come through the radio as I'm trying to listen to the Reds game. But that's like my first memory of listening to Reds baseball with Marty and Joe on my little transistor radio on my dad's F-100 Ford pickup truck.